Once upon a time, in a small town in the United States, there was an old abandoned mansion known as the Grayson Estate. The house had been abandoned for decades, but the townspeople still whispered stories of the strange occurrences that had taken place inside. One night, a group of teenagers decided to sneak into the Grayson Estate to explore and have some fun. They had heard rumors of ghosts and hauntings, but they didn't believe any of it. As they crept through the dusty halls and creaky staircases, they laughed and joked, dismissing the eerie feeling that hung in the air. But as they reached the top floor, a chill ran down their spines. In front of them stood a figure, shrouded in mist. It was a ghostly apparition of a woman, with long dark hair and tattered dress. The teenagers froze in terror as the ghostly figure glided towards them. Suddenly, the air was filled with a deafening screech, and the walls shook with a violent force. The teenagers tried to run, but they found themselves trapped in the room with the ghost. The apparition began to speak in a low, menacing voice, warning them to leave the house and never return. But the teenagers didn't listen. They were too fascinated by the ghostly figure and the mystery of the Grayson Estate. They returned to the house the following night, armed with cameras and recorders, hoping to capture evidence of the ghost. As they entered the mansion, the air grew thick with an eerie energy. Strange noises echoed through the halls, and objects moved on their own. Suddenly, the ghostly figure appeared before them once again. This time, she was accompanied by a group of other ghostly apparitions, all with dark, hollow eyes and an aura of malevolence. The teenagers tried to run, but the ghost chased after them, cornering them in a room on the top floor. The apparitions began to circle them, their voices rising in a deafening chorus of screams and moans. The room grew colder and colder until the teenagers could see their breath in front of them. Just as it seemed that the ghosts were about to claim their victims, a bright light filled the room, and the apparitions vanished into thin air. The teenagers stumbled out of the mansion, shaken and terrified, vowing never to return. But the ghosts of the Grayson Estate were not so easily dismissed. To this day, visitors to the town still report strange sightings and eerie sensations when passing by the old mansion. The ghostly apparitions of the Grayson Estate still haunt the town, warning visitors to stay away from their home. The legend of the Grayson Estate became famous throughout the town, and people started to avoid the mansion, leaving it to decay even more. However, every Halloween, some daredevils would sneak in, hoping to experience a ghostly encounter themselves. One such group was made up of college students who thought that the stories of the Grayson Estate were just a myth. They had heard of a haunted mansion and decided to make a short horror film for their media class. They had their cameras ready and were ready to shoot the entire film inside the Grayson Estate. As they entered the mansion, the students felt an eerie presence and the temperature dropped significantly. They heard strange noises and objects moved on their own, just like the stories they had heard. But they thought it was all part of the fun and continued filming. As they made their way to the top floor, they saw a flickering light, and a faint voice whispered in their ears, telling them to leave. The students were spooked, but they didn't want to give up the chance to capture something on film. They entered a room, and as they were setting up the camera, they heard a loud thud. When they turned around, they saw the ghostly figure of a woman standing in front of them. She had long dark hair and was wearing a tattered dress. Her eyes were hollow, and her face was contorted in rage. The students froze in terror as the ghostly figure approached them. Suddenly, the room started to shake, and a strong wind blew through the windows, slamming them shut. The ghostly figure let out a blood-curdling scream, and the students felt a force pulling them towards the wall. They tried to escape, but the door had shut, and they were trapped. The ghostly figure continued to scream, and the room grew colder and colder. The students were shaking with fear and could see their breath in front of them. Just as they thought they were doomed, the ghostly figure vanished, and the room was still. The students quickly gathered their cameras and ran out of the mansion, never to return again. They had captured footage of the ghostly encounter and had a story to tell for the rest of their lives. From that day on, the Grayson Estate was known as the most haunted house in the town. Visitors still report strange sightings and eerie sensations when passing by the old mansion. The ghostly apparitions of the Grayson Estate continue to haunt the town, warning visitors to stay away from their home, but some are still drawn to the mansion, hoping to experience a ghostly encounter themselves. Years passed, and the legend of the Grayson estate continued to grow. Some paranormal enthusiasts visited the mansion, hoping to capture evidence of the ghosts. Others simply passed by a house, feeling an eerie presence and an unexplainable sense of dread. One day, a group of college students decided to spend the night inside the mansion, daring each other to see who would last the longest. They set up their sleeping bags and turned off the lights, ready for a spooky night. As they tried to fall asleep, strange noises echoed through the halls, and objects moved on their own. The students were scared, but they thought it was all part of the fun. Suddenly, a loud noise shook the mansion, and the students felt the ground beneath them tremble. They quickly realized that the mansion was collapsing, and they were trapped inside. They tried to call for help, but their phones didn't have any signal. The students were terrified and had no idea what to do. As they were about to give up hope, they saw a faint light in the distance. It was the ghostly figure of a woman, beckoning them to follow her. The students were hesitant, but they had no other choice. They followed the ghostly figure through the hallways of the mansion, and she led them to a hidden room they had never seen before. The room was filled with old books and artifacts, and the students felt a sense of calm wash over them. The ghostly figure spoke to them in a soothing voice, telling them about the history of the mansion and the tragic fate of the Grayson family. The students were amazed and listened intently as the ghostly figure continued to tell them her story. After a while, the students felt safe and decided to leave the mansion. As they stepped outside, they saw that the mansion had disappeared, and in its place was a beautiful garden. They were stunned and couldn't believe what they were seeing. The ghostly figure appeared before them once again and told them that the curse of the Grayson estate had been lifted. The mansion had been destroyed to prevent any more tragedies, and in its place was a garden dedicated to the memory of the Grayson family. From that day on, the town was at peace, and visitors no longer felt an eerie presence when passing by the old mansion. The ghostly apparitions of the Grayson estate were never seen again, and the legend of the haunted mansion was finally put to rest. However, some say that on quiet nights, when the moon is full and the wind is still, you can still hear the whispers of the ghostly figure telling her story, and some claim to have seen a faint apparition of a woman in a tattered dress wandering through the garden. The story of the Grayson estate became famous throughout the country, and soon, people from all over the world came to visit the garden and pay their respects to the Grayson family. The garden became a symbol of hope and healing, a place where people could come to find peace and solace. The college students who had spent the night in the mansion became famous themselves, and their footage of the ghostly encounter went viral. They were interviewed on talk shows and invited to paranormal conventions, where they shared their experience with other enthusiasts. As for the town, it continued to thrive, and the memory of the Grayson estate faded into history. But for those who had experienced the ghostly encounter, the memory would stay with them forever. Some say that the Grayson estate was never really haunted, that it was just a story invented to scare people, but those who had seen the ghostly figure knew that it was real. They knew that there was more to the world than what could be seen with the naked eye. And so the legend of the Grayson estate lives on, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the mysteries of the unknown. Years after the incident, one of the college students who had spent the night at the Grayson estate returned to the town. He wanted to visit the garden and pay his respects to the Grayson family. As he walked through the garden, he noticed a small plaque near the entrance. Curious, he approached the plaque and read the inscription. It read, "In memory of the Grayson family, whose tragic fate brought the town together and inspired the creation of this beautiful garden, may their memory live on forever." Tears welled up in the college student's eyes as he realized the significance of the garden. He had never truly understood the impact that the Grayson family had on the town, and he felt a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for everything they had done. As he walked through the garden, he saw families playing together, couples strolling hand in hand, and people of all ages enjoying the beauty of the flowers and the tranquility of the space. He knew that the Grayson family would have been proud to see their legacy living on in such a beautiful way. As the sun began to set, the college student said a silent prayer for the Grayson family and thanked them for the gift of the garden. He knew that their memory would live on forever. and that the town would never forget the sacrifices they had made. And so, the Grayson estate became more than just a haunted mansion. It became a symbol of hope and resilience, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a glimmer of light. And for those who had experienced the ghostly encounter, it would forever be a part of their lives, a reminder of the mysteries of the unknown and the power of the human spirit. As time passed, the town continued to grow and prosper. The garden became a beloved landmark, and people from all over the world came to visit and experience its beauty. The town also became known for its rich history and haunted tales, with the Grayson estate being one of the most famous. Despite the many changes that occurred, the memory of the Grayson family remained strong. The town held an annual festival to celebrate their memory, and people came from far and wide to take part in the festivities. It was a time of joy and reflection, a time to remember the sacrifices that had been made and a legacy that had been left behind. The college student who had returned to the town became a regular visitor to the garden. He would often sit on one of the benches, watching the children play and the flowers bloom. He knew that the Grayson family would have been pleased to see the joy that their legacy had brought to so many people. One day, as he was sitting in the garden, he noticed an elderly woman sitting next to him. She had a gentle smile on her face, and he could tell that she was lost in thought. He introduced himself and struck up a conversation. As they talked, the woman revealed that she had grown up in the town and had known the Grayson family personally. She spoke of their kindness and generosity, and of the tragedy that had befallen them. The college student listened intently, feeling honored to hear her story. After a while, the woman got up to leave. Before she walked away, she turned to the college student and said, "Remember this garden, and remember the Grayson family. They were special people, and they will never be forgotten." The college student nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude and appreciation for the woman's words. He knew that the memory of the Grayson family would live on forever, and that their legacy would continue to inspire future generations. And so, the Grayson estate became more than just a haunted mansion. It became a symbol of hope, resilience, and community. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always a light that shines through. And for those who had experienced the ghostly encounter, it would forever be a part of their lives, a reminder of the mysteries of the unknown and the power of the human spirit.